Hey there, and welcome to the Dream Home Doorway podcast. If you've ever dreamed of having your own perfect home but thought it was out of reach, this show's for you. Today, we've got an episode that'll show you it's possible. Our guest today is Mike Smith, who's taken a big step towards making his dream home a reality. Mike and his family have bought some land, and they're on a mission to build their dream home from the ground up. They're in the early stages of this adventure, meeting with builders, picking a house plan, and figuring out what they really want, all while keeping an eye on their budget. In this episode, we'll explore how Mike and his family are making it all happen. It's a journey full of exciting discoveries, creative decisions, and making sure you don't break the bank. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or looking to upgrade your current home, there's something here for everyone. Mike's story shows you that you can have your dream home without breaking the bank, even from the ground up. We're opening the Dream Home Doorway, and we're in for a great episode. This is the Dream Home Doorway podcast, your guide to affordable home ownership. I'm Rachel Sterrett, and let's dive in. Welcome, Mike. I'm so glad to have you here with us today. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Absolutely. Yeah. First off, Rachel, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to tell our stories. My name is Mike Smith. I'm originally from upstate New York and have been down in North Carolina for about 20 years now. I've been married for 16 years. My wife is from the same small hometown up in upstate New York, suburb of Rochester, as I grew up. So I have been in the Army for 21 years now, and I'm retiring this year. And for most of that time, we have been in North Carolina. We have two children, a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, and two dogs. Our kids were both born here in North Carolina. And since then, since we've moved down here, about 50% of our family has migrated, our immediate family has migrated to North Carolina. So we have some pretty significant roots planted here. And that's a little bit about us. So we're retiring from the Army this year. So there's a little bit of some lifestyle transitions and new careers and a lot of exciting things going on for us. But yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you and your family so much for your service, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you so much. We're quite excited.
Big milestone. So a lot of big changes, exciting changes, which is amazing. So I know you're in the beginning of this journey. How long had you been considering the idea of building a new home before taking the first step?
So that's been a long run project, right? I would say that we've been dreaming about building our own home on our own land for about 8 years. And that is hitched to the same time that we moved into our current home. So about 8 years ago, we thought, wow, it'd be really nice to spread out and get onto a rural property and build our own home. But I was in the throes of a lot of deployments at that time, and I was in and out of the country just about every year. And we took a look at our family setup, and with young kids, my wife was like, this is just a little bit too much with you not being home a lot. So about 8 years ago, I believe, we decided that we would like to do this someday. And then, we had to wait until the rest of our lifestyle kind of made that possible. And in the last 3 years, we've gotten more serious as we could see my military retirement growing closer. And that's when we really kind of got serious and started looking for land and setting pieces in place to make this possible.
Okay. And what initially motivated or inspired you to embark on the journey of really building your own home from the ground up?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, about 3 years ago, we got serious and started looking for rural properties. And what we would find was that we would either find a beautiful piece of land that had a home on it that didn't suit our needs, or we would find one that did suit our needs with a sizable piece of land, something in the range that we were looking for, it was maybe 20 acres or so. We would find that it would be out of our price range. And really that has to do with that owner before you who was able to have that vision, carve out that land and build that home. That's a big project. And so they were expecting to be reimbursed for creating that value. So that was really where we determined, we're going to find a way to do this a little bit more incrementally, because if we find a turnkey solution for us, we found that it was often tremendously expensive.
Yeah, certainly, especially when you're looking for acreage and things like that. There are some other things to consider for sure. How did you determine? I know you talked a little bit about kind of the lifestyle and the changes that are happening right now, kind of leading you to this point. But how did you determine that it was the right time to really start construction, particularly considering the concerns that a lot of people have right now with interest rates?
Right. So, that is still a decision set that we're continuing to optimize. I think that's going to be different for every family and every customer. A lot of those variables that we began to calculate and take into consideration were our overall budget, the amount of cash we had on hand, what percentage of our mortgage, what percentage of our financial set that was expected to be that mortgage payment, both during this period of higher interest rates and then maybe where we expect them to be down the road. So, regarding the question, when was the right time to start construction? Well, we took a look at the totality of the interest rate and building cost kind of setup and said, we need to start taking incremental bites or this is just not going to be able to happen. So those are some of the decision points that we included in that. And we just determined that we can't be certain when the cost of living and the cost of borrowing money are going to come down. We expect that maybe within the next year from now as a timestamp. It's now November 2023. But, I think that we just needed to do double calculations and say, hey, let's take a look at what our financial structure looks like now during this period of higher interest rates and what do we expect it to look like down the road. So we began taking incremental bites and working on the things that we can't control.
Yeah, and even just, having the first meeting with a builder, or, if you're listening and you're not sure where you are with your finances, starting that as an incremental step and making sure you're aware of what your budget is, or speak to a lender, or know your credit score. So there are lots of incremental steps that you can take that are really different for everyone. It's just progress, which is really important. I know a lot of people out there looking to build who don't have land. That's one of the big things that they're like, well, how do I find it? And where do I start? I know you mentioned that you were looking for some acreage. What were some of the key factors that you took into account when selecting land for your future home?
This is my favorite part of our story to tell. We have had an incredible journey that hasn't all been easy regarding securing our land. So the first one, which is a cliche, but location. We wanted to stay in a particular area in order to stabilize our kids throughout their middle school and high school years. That was something that became important to us. So that helped us knock down a location where we wanted to stay, because we wanted to keep them in the same school district. Some other key factors that I think anybody looking for land must critically consider. Access, whether that's direct road access or whether it is deeded access that is actually recorded the last time that the property was transacted, is quite important. If it doesn't, if you have a landlocked chunk that does not have deeded access, that doesn't mean that it can't happen, but getting access to your property is something that is important. And you need to make sure that that's something that's possible when you move forward to make an offer and go to purchase it. The next one is, I think, one of the most key factors that I've learned to take into account, and that is what I'll call the cleanliness of the title. And I learned a very hard lesson trying to secure a piece of property for approximately 3 years, and more money than I care to share with our customers here, on a piece of property that I learned was co-owned by many more people than anybody ever expected. So, when you look up a deed and it says Michael Smith HRS, that means heirs of Michael Smith. And what that means is that some amount of surviving family members are actually the owners or co-owners of a piece of property. And my experience was that was an incredible task to surmount. And in the end, I ended up not being able to get everybody on the same page about this sale. So whenever anybody asks me advice, big things that I tell them to look for initially is the cleanliness of the title. Some properties are so much harder to transact than others. Last thing I'll leave you with is water management and having a suitable building location. Every piece of land has unique topography, and taking a look at a place with a keen eye towards, hey, where would a good place to build this home be? And do we have suitable water and suitable drainage for sewage management, if that is something that's going to be a factor for you guys too? I think that is something also that's important to consider.
Yeah, and every property has its own things to consider, and some are easier than others for sure. And at Red Door Homes, we do partner with our homeowners as well in evaluating the land even prior to purchase, to make sure that some of these items are looked at prior to, part of my story as well, because I've built a Red Door home, and we actually were in contract on a piece of waterfront land in Whispering Pines. That was really our dream, and we were so excited. And when Red Door went to look at it, they were like, oh, this piece of land specifically is in a floodway, but there's houses all around it. And so nothing that would leave me to think that it would be expensive to build on. We would have needed a study from the Army of Engineers, and it was just too much that we wouldn't have the money or resources to really look into. So luckily, I was able to get out of that contract, prior to the due diligence time ending, but we could have been stuck with, a piece of property that was very expensive. So my advice is make sure that you have somebody knowledgeable assisting you with the land side of things, because if you're new and you're not really sure what to look for, it can be, an expensive and time consuming experience. So it's definitely important to have someone on your side, which is good.
The one thing that you're mentioning is a great example of why to bring somebody in early in the decision-making process, right? That's a great example of how consulting a builder, in your case, Red Door, was able to help you even before transacting on a piece of land, just to make sure that that land suited what you were looking to do with it, right? So that's a great example of how bringing in an expert early can help prevent you from making, I guess, what would have been a mistake. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to build our home had we had that land, and it's still for sale, which is like 6 years later. So if that doesn't tell you something, was there anything else that drew you into your specific location or the specific property that you ended up purchasing?
Well, I mentioned the land that we couldn't close on, and this was an adjacent property that had all the conditions that we talked about, right? It was easier to transact because it wasn't held by heirs. It was owned by one individual. But it wasn't as ideal of a building location, right? It was always an if and only if, kind of a conditional desire for me. I did want this property, the one that we ended up buying, only if, at least for a while, if I could have closed on the first one. I wanted this to be an adjacent property where we'd keep our fields. Eventually, we got into a scenario where enough time went by and we said, you know what, will this other property work for our needs? And if so, then this may be that bird in hand scenario where, this is something that we can, even though it wasn't our first choice, this is one that's available that meets in different ways those conditions that we talked about before better than the initial property. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of switching gears to your wish list and choosing the floor plan. When creating your wish list for your new home, what were some of the top non-negotiable items that you and your family just couldn't compromise on?
So we really wanted a first floor primary bedroom. Right now, our primary bedroom is upstairs. We wanted a first floor bedroom. And that really had to do with longevity in the home. My wife and I were kind of forecasting our needs now, but also 20 to 25 years from now, when we have 25 additional years of age on us, what are we going to want to keep climbing stairs after the children have left and started their own families and into our older years. So we wanted a first floor bedroom. I need an office for my new job. And we wanted a guest suite to be able to host our parents when they come into town or out of town guests a little bit better than we are able to now. So those, I think, were our three non-negotiable items that we talked about.
Yeah, some pretty common wish list items for sure. Specifically regarding affordability, were there any trade-offs or compromises that you've had to make when finalizing your wish list and floor plan to make sure that you stay within your budget?
Yeah, so I think that one thing that we have come to realize, or at least begin to see from our own perspective, is that we don't see bigger as better all the time. And I think in some aspects, we have compromised a little bit of square footage in favor of certain features that we need more than another, or certain building materials that we have grown to really uh, value and prefer. One example of that is flooring, right? So we just, as a family, for some reason, we really like high quality flooring. It's just a place that you interface with all the time. So that's one example of where we would maybe make a trade-off, where we know that quality flooring is important to us, perhaps more so than square footage. So that's going to be different for every family, but we just have our preferences, just like everybody does.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about building your own home is that you do get to make that choice. And if square footage is on the top of your wish list, you have that ability to maybe add or change some of the features over time. And for a lot of people, it is the features or add-ons or bells and whistles that they really want, to walk into their new home in from the beginning. So definitely having that opportunity is one of the advantages of building from the ground up for sure. What advice would you offer to anyone starting to create their wish list for their home to ensure they obtain, what they really want to have?
I would recommend that folks be formulaic about it in some way. And I think one way to do that is just go from big to small and decide how many rooms do you need first off, and then how many, and I guess when I say rooms, I'm talking about bedrooms. How many bedrooms, or how many folks do we really need to sleep? Um, how many would be ideal versus how many are absolutely required? And then maybe wash that over with how much space one needs now versus how much space they want to take care of 20 to 30 years down the road, as their season of life changes. That's something that we kind of evaluated as we were going. But also, how long does one want to stay there? If this is a 10-year project for you, then some of those things aren't necessarily considerations, and you can hone in more closely on what your current needs are. But I think you just need to know, like any investment or like any new purchase that is this significant, we just need to take into consideration, what do I need it to do? How long am I going to keep it? And what resale considerations do I need to make as well, right? That may be something else, depending on where you're building. Building something that still kind of fits into the area around it so that it is not an anomaly and thus becomes kind of hard to list in the future.
Yeah, and you're planning your forever home, and we do build for a lot of military families kind of still in the middle or beginning of their military career. And for them, it is a little bit different because this probably is going to be a transitional home that they may plan to rent out, later on. So how can they maximize their investment, long term as a rental property or someone who's building a investment property from the beginning? So it is really important to consider, what the long term plan is. And my recommendation too is if you're building with a partner, a spouse, family members, sit down together and make your wish list, because you might be surprised how different they are. And we see that a lot at our discovery tours with families who have kind of opposing wish list items. And it can be helpful to kind of hash that out early on and say, okay, these are my must-haves. What are yours? And how can we bring them together so that when you do meet with a builder, you have an idea of what's important to both of you so that you can incorporate as much as possible. That's certainly helpful. So, Mike, I know that you're in the research stage. You've met with Red Door Homes, you've met with some other builders. What has been your experience in exploring your options with Red Door Homes and the other builders so far?
So I think that the most overarching theme that I've noticed is that there are many builders, and it can be overwhelming when you're first beginning this process. So I found great comfort in talking to Red Door and then sourcing some, and Red Door was one of the recommendations that came from my friends. But, in talking to different friends that had experience building, I assembled a list of, I had to neck it down from maybe the 100 that are in my area down to a handful, right? So that it was manageable. And, Red Door and a couple of other local builders were the outputs of that list. So my experience were that it seemed like everybody had a reasonably similar offering, but different ways that you're allowed to customize. And for some builders that I met, they really wouldn't allow a lot of adjustability because they only want to build a certain style of house or a certain level of trim. So some folks were kind of immovable in their positions and the level of customization. Others were more customizable. I'd find Red Door on the higher end of that customizable approach. And, as we talked about different, challenges that are found in the current financial environment with both cost of building and interest rates, what I found is that level of customizability helped problem solve around a lot of challenges, right? Because, we were able to develop a plan that allowed us to put money where we wanted it or where we felt like it was prioritized. In our example, we mentioned that we really liked customized flooring, and then we were able to, forego some certain things in other places. So that level of customization was something that I think was really favorable, especially now. So that's been my experience. Most folks offer something similar, but many don't allow a lot of left and right limits for customizing.
Yeah, and for those of you who are starting the journey as well listening, there are some different structures of how builders cost as well. So one being what's called a fixed cost builder, which is Red Door Homes, and then another being a cost plus builder. And I think it's really important that you kind of understand the differences of those. With Red Door Homes and other fixed cost builders, you'll know the final cost of the home before you start building. Now, of course, if you're adding things or there's differences to preparing your land, that's different. But with a fixed cost or with a cost plus builder, you're going to pay a percentage on top of what the cost of the materials were. A lot of the times you don't know that until the end. So it's important, when you're meeting with builders, to make sure that you understand how their pricing structure works as well. When evaluating builders with specific aspects or questions, have you found, or what have you found the most vital in making your decisions? What questions have really helped you during your evaluations?
For me personally, questions that helped tease out that builder's impression of the timelines for completion and the level of oversight that they have with their builds when it comes to subcontractors and how much direct supervision the builder has with the overall process. So anything that really kind of helps telegraph communication styles and frequency and levels of automation, they're important to me. And that's going to be, different things will be important to different folks. My questions are less technical. I don't have building acumen, so I want to completely outsource that to a professional. But in order to do that as efficiently, I need to make sure that I'm not getting the feeling that I'm going to have to continuously prompt people for the next action or to get the next step done. So things that telegraphed a builder's ability to project manage efficiently were the things that are like, those are the questions that I like to ask and just make sure that it seems like that's going to be a smooth process. That could also be born of me just not being able to technically support any tough questions about a home build or framing or anything like that. We all like to stick within our expertise, right?
Absolutely. How significant is trust and open communication in your decision-making process when comparing builders like Red Door Homes and others?
I think trust and open communication is really the only way to make an experience that is this significant as building a home palatable at all, right? If we can't have open and honest discussions to inform the decision-making that both, the builders and we as offerers are making, without open and trustful communication, like I don't see how that could be possible with any measure of peace. So it's critically important.
And how important is affordability when it comes to selecting a home builder to partner with?
Well, I wish it were less important to me right now as an individual, but it's certainly a factor, right? Everybody has a budget, and we have to be keenly aware of it. So we're sure that this thing that we're building is actually a gift for our families and not a curse down the road, right? So we want to make sure that it fits in with the entire, aspect of our family's financial suite, and make sure that it's something that's complementary to our lifestyles and doesn't become burdensome. So affordability is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that balance of affordability and quality, the communication, the trust, it's, everything that goes into the decision-making process for sure.
It's a big math problem, right? Like, everything's going in where we have cost, we have quality, we have time. There are so many levers and they all just need to be kind of custom custom adjusted for each family and what it is that they hope to get out of their process, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts or advice for those considering purchasing land and building a home?
Yeah. I would say make a plan, and it doesn't have to be a fast one, but if you lay out your goal, your ideal timeline, and then backwards plan those sub steps, I think you can shrink the definition of success for a different given time period. Example of what is not that is just saying, oh gosh, I wish we could live on a beautiful farm, but it's not time bound and it's not attackable in small chunks. And the advice I would give is that in today's building and financial environment, it's way too lofty and not concrete enough to act on small steps, right? So if we conversely say we want to live in a place like this in a certain amount of years, we can backwards plan, and given the time that we know it will take to do a physical build, and then in front of that put in the search for a builder, and then put in front of that land clearing, and put in front of that land purchase, and we can start to define success differently and say, you know what, if I can search for and find 3 potential suitable properties in the next quarter, then I have been successful in taking a small bite towards my goal. So that's what I would do, is make a plan and break it up into small chunks.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this podcast today, you've already taken a small step, you're in the research phase. If you haven't met with any builders or you feel like you're not ready yet, take a discovery tour at Red Door Homes, do some, information digging at other builders, and just learn, get the information that you need to make an informed decision when that time becomes right for you, because we never know when things are going to change. And the best thing that you can do for yourself is just learn and gain knowledge. And that way, if anything changes or the time comes, you're in a position to move forward. So it's all, like Mike said, small steps. A special thanks to Mike Smith for sharing his story with us. We wish him and his family all of the best in their home building adventure. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated on our future discussions about affordable home ownership, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Also, please share your thoughts, questions, and suggestions with us. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time as we explore more exciting stories and insights about achieving your dream home. Until then, keep dreaming, planning, and making your dream home doorway a reality. See you soon.